Hello and welcome to the Emancipated Citizen Podcast. Ben, with me is Zach, and a very special guest who has also worked with Atheist Alliance International, like me and Zach, Leo Igwe from Nigeria. Leo, want to tell us about yourself?
Yes, like you said, I'm from Nigeria. I'm an atheist and humanist, free thinker. I'm not always very interested in all these labels. And the thing there is that one is I try to examine claims and beliefs, and I take a position that is in line with reason and humanity. Yes, I've been working to grow the humanist group in Nigeria, lead a lot of campaigns. I'm going to talk about some of them today. Campaign against witch persecution, which is one of the main problems we face here. Ritual killing of albinos or people living with albinism, as they say. And we'll also be facing the threat of being accused of blasphemy by, of course, mainstream religious organizations. We are also campaigning very seriously about that. So we have a couple of other programs in place. So that I'm so happy and I'm glad to be here to discuss some of these campaigns, the challenges are facing, and then what's the future for humanism and the free thought in Africa, a region that has been reputed to be the most religious, when it comes to maybe comparatively speaking and globally speaking. So it's my pleasure to be here to interact with you, Ben and Zach. And I'm looking forward to having some very fruitful conversation.
Yeah, so your degree is in philosophy. You have a PhD in philosophy, in fact, which definitely fits well with witchcraft. So in Nigeria, who's generally targeted and who's usually targeting them?
Well, you see, I want to make it clear that witchcraft is an English word, is an European concept. Okay, so I'm going to use an English word to explain and express something that is non-English. So that's really where the challenge comes in here. Now, when it comes to targeting people, everybody is targeted, but it's not everybody you can actually confront, you can actually tackle on the basis of that target. So that's where the politics comes in. Now, a lot of people make sense of their lives in a way, religiously, spiritually, supernaturally. In other words, when they cannot explain something, there's always a tendency for them to think, oh yeah, this is spiritual. Now, if it is positive, of course, they thank God. They don't mind. They don't worry. Now, if it is destructive, they get worried. And they can get into all sorts of supernatural, ritualistic performances in order to assuage that. So they could talk about the ancestors, although it could be the ancestors, they need some sacrifice. The devil, the demons. It could also be punishment from God. People also could attribute that to what they call the witches. That's the English word now. In other words, there are some people who have some magical powers and they want to use that to undermine you, to destroy you. So witchcraft accusation features within the realm of misfortunes where people don't find commonsensical explanation, or they are not satisfied by that. They think there's something missing. It's not sufficient. There must be something lurking there. But if it is within the spectrum of other supernatural narratives, like ancestors, like the gods, punishment from the gods could actually be attributed to witchcraft, as when you ask the religious expert. So that is how it is. So a lot of people are targeted, men and women, children, people with disabilities. But the worry there is that on whom can you enforce that? You can't think that, oh, this rich and powerful person is after you. But you cannot confront the person because the person could use his clout and power, put you into prison, punish you for that. So it is always easier to target people who are on the weaker side of the society. Or even if you want to go after that powerful person, you might use some non-confrontational means, wishing the person death, waiting the day you hear, and oh, he lost election. Oh, he had an accident. You say, oh, yeah, good. Yes, they have come after him. So what am I trying to say? I don't want to come here and tell you rich people, powerful people are not targeted. The thing is that a lot of people who accuse them, who suspect them, they don't have the means and facility to confront and tackle them, go to their houses, send them away like you can do to people who are poor or people who are on the periphery, on the fringes of society. So to answer your question, everybody can be suspected of witchcraft, including myself speaking. But it is not easy for anybody to come to me, come to my house and say, yes, you are the one, we're going to get you out of this community. They only go after those they can enforce the label on, and these are always those who are on the weaker side of the society. These are all vulnerable groups, women, elderly persons, and people living with disabilities. So these are those whom you see out there at the extreme end of the targeting. But it does not mean that they are the only ones suspected, they are the only one accused. They are the only one that people are thinking that, oh, look, they could be using some magical means to undermine the welfare or good or the fortune of others.
Is it common for people to accuse rival politicians of having witches that work for them?
Yeah. The thing there is that when it comes to politics, you get that accusations a lot, okay? But what happens is that they take measures. That is why many politicians, they employ a lot of clerics. The Muslims, they employ the marabouts, because these are people who will be around them to assure them that they are fortified, that whatever they're trying to do to undermine them, they have taken care of it. So that's why you see a lot of people employ priests, pastors. The politicians go to them for prayer, special prayers and things like that, because they always think that their failure, or like now there's a case in one particular state where one of the politicians who wanted to contest the election in next year just suddenly took ill and he had a stroke. So they're saying that, oh yeah, it could be the rival, politician who was responsible for that. These are always circumstances where some of these accusations manifest. So it happens. We have that feature among politicians or rival politicians.
Yeah, some things never change. That happened hundreds of years ago in Britain too. Prince Rupert, in particular, was accused of having a bunch of witches protecting him.
Essentially, I guess what you're getting to is that in order to execute a witch hunt of any sort, you have to kind of convince the rest of the community to join along and use their power to bring that person down. How widespread is the genuinely held belief of witchcraft, and how many or what proportion of the accusations you like very roughly say based on experience are based in like a genuine belief that this person has supernatural power, or is it that with a mixture of some like cynical like personal motives that are very cynically and clearly covered by this kind of supernatural accusation, taking advantage of some of the population being not very educated? How would you view that aspect of it?
Yeah, the fact there is that for the people who believe in witchcraft is as real as they believe it. Okay. Now, if you're analyzing how much of it is as a result of education, you are discussing it from outside. Okay, it's just like you're doing an academic exercise. Now, what happens is that people growing up, people are socialized. Children are socialized to believe that witches or supernatural agents are actively involved in their everyday life. And this is reinforced by the dominant religion, traditional religion, Christianity and Islam. So one of the reasons why it is really difficult to make some of these distinctions is that the religious indoctrination that people receive reinforces these beliefs. Christian, Muslim, traditional religion. So it is not easy to make a distinction between a called witchcraft belief and Islamic religion or Christian religion or traditional religion. No, they are all meshed, and they all merged in the same superstitious indoctrination that people receive. So that you may be very rich and popular, but you still have this belief. You may also look at what is going on in the community as a result of envy or jealousy. But you will always hear people say, even though this one is envy and jealousy, but there are witches and wizards. There's always a but there. So in everybody, there's this residual belief that there is a place for the magical agents, supernatural agents, and occult agents. And you may never know. Because what they accuse me of, that I'm so sure that why am I so sure that these people are not really doing what they're accused to do? That I don't know everything. So why are you leading a campaign and saying these people are innocent when you are claiming as if you have known everything? So there's always a lot of people have this kind of caution that, okay, even though I don't believe in this, what's going on in this community, but you cannot rule out the fact that evil people are there. The devil is at work. Okay, so it is really difficult to know how to categorize these beliefs, because while people might object to certain instances of witch persecution and claiming that, this is as a result of envy, this is as a result of patriarchy, male domination, they will always come to add a clause that, however, there are still witches and wizards, and people can still harm others through the magical means. So that's why it is actually very challenging, to say exactly which one, because anyone I attribute as envy, another person will say, oh, that might be the real one. You may never know. So it is neither here nor there, an egg and chicken kind of thing. It is really difficult to put it in a box. And again, the Christian religion, which is dominant in many parts of Nigeria, has in Exodus 22:18, it says, suffer not a witch to live. And they tell us this every time we go out to campaign. And they ask you, okay, are you saying that Christianity is not true, or Christianity is not the word of God? And immediately you try to contest that. There'll be a shutdown. There'll be hostility. They think you are satanic. You are anti-Christian and all that. So it is a very complicated, narrative to really make distinctions as to which is which, so that everybody who comes on board and makes that accusation is deeply convinced of it, because the person has gone to an expert, the person believes in it strongly, and the person thinks that if you're an outsider, you might not see those necessary connections. You might not see these causal, links, which the person has established over the years, and they see it as you a kind of poke nosing, infiltrated into something that is not yours. So that's why one could, if you say it here, is as an outsider. And an insider person will tell you it is not as you're saying it, because you don't believe, because you didn't experience it. A lot of people think that these experiences are subjective and they're not something translatable, and they're not something that they can get you to experience. So if you dismiss it, it's because you didn't experience it. So it's always very hard to make some of these distinctions. But having said that, you look at where it's taking place. It's always within the rural community, where they have limited facility, where there are no hospitals, and if there are hospitals, they are few and far apart, and where the hospitals are not accessible in terms of services and medical care and all that. And again, where people are very poor, and there's a lot of social stress and insecurity and uncertainty. All these come together to create a situation where witch persecution and witch accusation, they thrive and flourish.
Sorry. So, Leo, before you said that there's no such thing as like Muslim witchcraft or Christian witchcraft, that those beliefs aren't necessarily under the main belief of Islam or Christianity, but I find it difficult to imagine that people's religious upbringing and perceptions don't inform persecutions and those kinds of suspicions and beliefs and my follow-up question to that is there like common work between, say, Muslims or Christians where interfaith communities might go after specific people or groups despite their differing conception of witchcraft? Like, for example, an integral part of what witchcraft entails involves jinn, right? And within the Christian worldview, this concept of jinn isn't really there. You have demons, which are slightly different, but is there a lot of crossover between Christian and Muslim faith groups and how they implement those actions?
Yeah, I think if I get you correctly, the thing is that in Ghana, in the north of Ghana, they are dominantly Muslim. In southern Nigeria, dominantly Christian. In the north of Nigeria, we also have Muslims and Christians. They live side by side. Now, accusations take place in these communities. In fact, the witch camps we talk about in Ghana that are located in the northern part and predominantly Muslim section of the country. What happens is that when people have challenges bordering on accidents and poverty, they have a way of making this distinction and say, okay, this is a witchcraft issue. Okay, it is not an Islam issue. In fact, I went to what they call a witch camp, where the traditional priest goes to mosque to pray when it's time to pray, and goes to the shrine to do the sacrifice for witchcraft and people who are accused when it's time. So they just, how do you call it, shop. There's this forum shopping kind of thing. They go from here and there depending on what you want. So when you want Muslim prayer, you go to the Malam and get the prayer. Or if you want, when it comes to this accusation, they will tell you, okay, take it to the shrine. So the people know what to do and where to take their problems. Okay, so that's actually how it coexists. So these religions are there, helping people make sense of issue, and they know what to take where when it happens. But what happens is that whether you call it Islam or Christianity, they all promote active supernatural agents. They always teach that the supernatural, they are active in our lives. They can influence our life for good and evil. So these beliefs, they reinforce the belief in witchcraft, because the belief in witchcraft, what underlies it is also that there are some supernatural, magical, occult forces that can harm our lives. So this is where they intersect. This is where they believe in Islamic beliefs and Christian beliefs, they reinforce it. And it's making it difficult for us to address the problem. Because when you try to address a problem, they try to tell you, okay, are you a Christian or a Muslim? Do you believe in God? They start quoting provisions in the Bible, principalities and powers as in the Christianity, or they start telling you about the jinns. For those from the Muslim background, they start telling you about the jinns, and things like that, and beliefs that are like, or they tend to reinforce these notions. So if you ask me, Christianity is part of the problem in terms of our trying to address this. Islam is part of the problem. But more importantly, is this idea that Islamic teachings should not be questioned. Muslim prophetic teachings should not be, you cannot expose the absurdity of what Muhammad said or teachings or his lifestyle and all that. So by shielding, by opposing, by criminalizing in quotes or discouraging criticism of religious beliefs, including Islamic beliefs, is making it difficult for us to get rid, expose, and highlight the dangers and harms of some of these supernatural narratives which Muslim communities or Muslim establishment condone in some form or another.
Yeah, I mean, like a literal stance on the textual traditions at the very least seems to be to make it impossible for certain communities to think outside of a specific text, and that's the main problem is when you say this text is from God and it's the absolute truth, and you are under no circumstances allowed to question any part of it. Whereas, like, I think there are religious communities around the world now more than before that that don't necessarily take this stance. And I think within like the Judeo-Christian tradition is more widespread than Islam. But even in Islam, one can think of some examples of that. So yeah, I think my hope for the future for that is that people no longer see the star picture of one single source of truth there, and be able to criticize this part or that part, or have an open discussion about it, even if you don't leave your identity of Christianity or Islam or whatever it is behind, right?
Yeah, and who is most often the accused of being a witch in Nigeria?
Well, I think it's usually the poor people, it's usually the elderly, it's usually the disabled, is usually the people on the weaker side. You see, they are the people accused. But like I said, people are suspected. I want to make a distinction between accusation and suspicion. Yes, because why I make that distinction is that accusation sometimes goes with this kind of active confrontation of the person suspected. Suspicion, you could be having it, even you could be having it without really confronting the person, but you'll be taking measures to protect yourself and avoid anything that would further endanger you, but you're unable to really confront the person. So if you say who is being suspected, everybody can be suspected. In fact, you can actually be suspecting somebody without actually accusing the person. But accusation sometimes has to do with confrontation, turning that suspicion now into a kind of an active allegation. I say, hey, you've been doing this to me, and I have gone somewhere, I have found out that this is what's going on. So that's why I said it's usually the elderly, people on the weaker side of the society, the disabled, because these are people you can actually accuse without much consequences to yourself. Yes, because they won't be able to do much in terms of responding, in terms of defending themselves, and you can successfully accuse them. So yes, it is the women, elderly women, elderly men also, the poor people. These are people who are likely going to suffer accusation.
Yeah, and Zach and I actually talked about this in our last episode about who gets accused of witchcraft. And in Saudi Arabia, it's almost how often does it affect anyone other than domestic help in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I was gonna say this does remind me of our last conversation, and I said that it's relatively common in comparison to other parts of society to accuse like a domestic servant of witchcraft, but it would be absolutely unthinkable to accuse a princess of witchcraft, right? So yeah, I think this has been a clear aspect of witch persecutions throughout history. Yeah, at least there's a tendency there, right?
Yeah, except of course when somebody does the opposite. And
yeah, that's what I mean by a tendency. It doesn't always like it doesn't apply in every case, and also I think an aspect of it is when people aren't completely assimilated into the majority society, and people say have religious traditions that the neighboring people, the people around them, view as foreign and strange. Like when this fear response is evoked, this feeling that you don't know what's going on and what they're doing and what they're talking about and why they're moving their bodies this way and drawing this or whatever, right? And it's to a degree, I guess, a kind of a natural response to foreign religious practices that has been systematized in a way.
Yeah, and also just how If you listen to the History of Witchcraft by Samuel Hume, he actually talks about how a lot of royalty, especially English kings, would claim that witches were attacking them because it meant they were godly because the devil was trying to attack them. Notably, one of their princes was in his had a when he got married and met his wife in Denmark and then came home and then sailed home with her. They got hit by a storm and he spent years trying to track down the witches who caused the storm. And even now, Russia has started accusing Ukrainians of using witchcraft as part of an explanation for how Ukraine is still there after almost a year of war against the second army in the world, in quotes. Not that there
Yeah,
isn't
who
a
exactly is making those accusations? Like at the top of the government, or like
uh, I mean, official propaganda. Russian state television's made the accusations, uh, and devil worship. Never. Not that this should be about Ukraine. Never mind that Ukrainians attend church at a much higher rate than Russians do, and not that there isn't a tradition of magic in Ukraine like there is in Africa too. There definitely is, and there are still people who practice it. But ridiculous accusation too.
Does the law cover witchcraft in any way in any of those countries? Like first you were talking about Russia, right? I'm very curious, even though it has nothing to do with the topic of this episode.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I'm sure it did once. I seriously doubt it does now. Ukraine's laws most certainly don't. And,
so
well, Russia doesn't have the death penalty, and yet an awful lot of people are mysteriously falling out of windows in Russia. So, hey.
what about the Nigerian law? Is there any category for witchcraft or punishments or anything of the sort regarding that in Nigerian law?
Yes, yes. Actually, in the Nigerian law, we have a section in our criminal code. They call it Section 210 of the criminal code and Section 216 also of the penal code. These sections, they criminalize witchcraft accusation. Yeah, they make it a crime for anybody to accuse another person, call another person a witch, because of course it was something they inherited from the British colonial authorities. So, but they just put it there. But what happens is that nobody actually cares about this. Nobody actually, pays attention to it. So, and that's one of the things we are doing by trying to, draw attention to this provision, in our law, and let people understand that it's actually a crime to call somebody a witch under the law. So, but what happens is that people's beliefs sometimes overwhelm, or is actually what applies, not even what is in the law. In fact, we had a situation that was, I think, last year, where the court asked the accused to really heal somebody. Some people were accused of making somebody sick, and they brought them to the court, and the judge asked those accused to heal the person in the law court. Yeah. So, which is completely, against what was written in the law, because you don't really accuse. If you accuse, you commit a crime. So, our system here is overwhelmed by complaints of witchcraft, so that the judges find themselves in the position whereby they actually discard what the law says, and are doing something opposite. Because I was at a police station that was a month or two ago, and the police officer was telling me that they need to criminalize witchcraft so that they could also investigate it. And I was like, what are you going to investigate? So that's the situation. There's a lot of pressure to really remove the provision in the law against witchcraft accusation and replace it with one that recognizes witchcraft, of course, which makes no sense. So that's actually where we are now. And a lot of people are saying that unless that is replaced, the problem we are having in terms of accusations will not stop. So the law is against witchcraft accusation, but not enforcement because of the fact that it goes against much of what the society believes in. Recently, we tried to organize a program in Benue State in Nigeria, and the information they were spreading was that witches we are trying to meet. Meanwhile, the campaign we are waging is advocacy against witch persecution, which is actually what the law, which is what the law recognizes, that what the law expects us to do is to protect the accused. So, but my campaign in terms of the advocacy for alleged witches, they took it as that I was promoting witchcraft, and I was trying to bring together witches and wizards to the state, and everybody was like went into a panic mode, and they reported us to the governor, and the governor told the police to invade our venue. They came there with guns and vehicles and took over the venue and told us to go home, that we could not meet. And I tried to explain to them. I said, hey, man, this is against witch persecution, which is what is written in the law. But of course, they said, oh, they got information that witches were meeting. Okay, where are they? Where are the witches meeting? So there is a whole lot of fear, anxiety, panic, so that when people hear witches, they don't really want to know, are they talking about witchcraft accusation? Are they talking about against witchcraft accusation? So this is one of the reasons. So you see the police officers misinformed, and they themselves also believe in witches and wizards. So it's difficult for them to enforce the law. So it took a lot of explanation before the police could actually, give us audience. But the governor never approved of our meeting, because the information with them was that, oh, we are trying to encourage witchcraft. We are trying to bring together witches to the state and all that, and that they will not allow it. And I told them, look, I don't believe that witches exist. I don't actually believe in it. For me, it's superstition and all that. But when you are talking to them, they have already made up their mind. When they hear witches, they just get off their senses. So it is a challenging campaign to wage here, and we are doing whatever we can to use the law, draw attention to the provisions of the law, so that we can help address the atrocities going on in different parts of Nigeria and the region in the name of witchcraft, because it is a lot. In October, they tortured a woman to death. They cut open her stomach. They put stick inside the private part in the course of torturing her to death in a shrine as a result of witchcraft accusation. They threw people into the river. They lynched them. They burned them. Some weeks ago, a man beat the uncle to death and said they set the corpse ablaze. So all these are, it always ends in tragedy. So there's a need for us to confront this big elephant in the room, which is witchcraft fears and anxieties, which have consumed so many people. And so we are doing our best to draw attention and use the law, the existing provisions of the law, to see what we can do to beat back the tide of witch persecution and related abuses.
Yes, so following the law, the police are there aren't coming any consequences to the people breaking the law by making those accusations, and they're going after the accused, the victims, essentially, of this crime. And what happens generally to those people when, like, if they're caught by the police or something? Like you said, like, as far as I understand, witchcraft itself isn't criminalized. There isn't a law against it or anything. So they're being held ostensibly for their own protection, right? Yeah. How does that go about generally?
What happens to the people who are accused? Yeah.
Yeah. Especially people, like, say, people who get arrested by the police for this kind of thing.
Okay. Okay, now what happens? It depends on so many issues. First of all, very often the police don't want to get involved. Yes. Reason one is that some of them don't want to get involved because they are not sure that those people being accused, are always not guilty as accused. So many police officers don't want to get involved. Secondly, the people who are victimized are very often the poor, people who cannot afford, don't have the resources to do police case or do court cases. Yes, because in Nigeria, it is not enough to report a matter to the police. You have to get the resources to go there and sometimes bribe the police to do what they're supposed to do. Now, imagine when an elderly woman, no pension, no money, is beaten up. She doesn't want to go to the police because the police will ask for money before they can make any arrest. In the court, the same thing. So in many cases, they abandon they resign to the situation. But that's what we're trying to do at the Advocacy for Alleged Witches is to help provide that missing link and bring the police and get them involved. So where they don't have the resources, they just resign to the situation. Because if they go to the police stations, it's money. They have to, and they don't have this money. These are poor people. So, and if they have to go to court, it's the same thing. They have to hire a lawyer. And hiring a lawyer is something many of them have never done in their life because they cannot afford it. And the state cannot even provide them anyone. And if the state provides, the person will demand to be paid every time the person comes to court, whether the court sits or not. So for the accused, it is more torture, more trauma, bankruptcy, pushing them more and more down the poverty, hole and all that. So many of them just abandon the case and allow everything to remain that way. So, but there are occasions when the people who are accused have relatives who have the means to pursue the case. Like the one that happened in October, the daughter is well enough, is well to do, and they had to send money to the police officers so that they could go into these communities and make arrests. So on such occasions, the accused, already can take police action or get police to take action or go to court. But in other cases, they just resign to the situation. And because they don't have the resources to take the accusers to court or get justice. So justice for the accused is for sale, is for the highest bidder. And many of the people don't have what it takes to go into that bidding. So they just resign to their situation. So that's what happens.
So what you would say in that sense, I guess, is that the law enforcement apparatus works for the highest bidder, right? Like
yes.
Whoever, yeah.
Yes, that's what happens. And because the people who are often accused are on the low side in terms of income, in terms of politics, it's difficult for them to really get justice. And that's exactly one of the things we are doing at our Advocacy for Alleged Witches is to see how we can help, fill in that gap. Because as soon as the accused people go to court, the accusers, they run away. Yes, they run away. Yes, they try to evade arrest and they'll start looking for ways to settle out of court. But many of them are so poor that they have not actually been to a police station before. They have not actually been to a court. They don't even have the means to hire lawyers or to bring police officers to execute arrest. So that's why when it happens, they just resign to their situation, and which is very sad and unfortunate, when it comes to the plight of people who are accused of witchcraft.
Yeah.
So this kind of very arbitrary accusation, I guess, can be blamed in large part to corruption within law enforcement and politics. Right. So hey, you have kind of a hole there where people can essentially just put money to accuse other people of an imaginary crime, essentially, right?
Yeah. The corruption is there, especially in trying to get justice post accusation, because that's when you start dealing with institutions, the police, the courts, the politicians, the state actors, other state actors, because very often they cannot act unless they are induced, unless they are motivated, unless they are, in quote, mobilized. That they use all sorts of terms to get you to understand that they can't just act. So that's where the corruption comes in, and that is one of the things we are also trying to do, to highlight this corrupt situation and make sure we don't resign to it, because it's been there for too long and it's been responsible for the continuation of this persecution and allegations. So we hope to fight it in the process of ensuring that the accused people get justice and they are protected.
Yeah, and what kind of things do people say that witches can do?
All sorts of things: accidents, poverty, miscarriage, loss of jobs, unemployment, any kind of misfortune. Like during the COVID, there was a lockdown, and a lot of people had no jobs. We don't have set welfare system here. So if you don't have money or savings in your account, I mean, sorry, you're just gonna, either you go and steal or you just die of hunger. These are two things. So a lot of people, we had this situation where some people said that a particular man has tied their destiny, that made it difficult for them to make progress. So they blame the man for the hardship and lack of progress in their communities. So all sorts of things, people can always attribute it to witchcraft. But of course, when you look at that, you look at communities that are not well served, communities that lack institutions, basic infrastructure, where you don't have people are not employed, they don't have job, they don't have any basic source of income. So they live in so much uncertainty. And within that uncertainty, whatever happens to an individual, it could be people with existing medical conditions. They don't know. And if they suddenly die, they will now think that, yeah, it is witchcraft. So the absence of these facilities, the dysfunctional situation of these facilities, predisposes people to attribute all sorts of misfortune, to witchcraft or to the supernatural. And like I said earlier, witchcraft is just a subcategory within the supernatural spectrum of causing misfortune, of supernaturally attributed misfortune. So witchcraft is just one of them. So, but what people do is that when they cannot, resolve it either by making sacrifice, by praying, by devotions, they now try to look for, they shop within the supernatural supermarket. They now look for one they could easily attribute as what explains a particular situation. So they can attribute anything, to witchcraft. And again, it is not just individual attribution. Sometimes they go to places, traditional healers, traditional spiritualists, traditional prophets, malams, pastors, and people who also claim to have power to understand the supernatural and know exactly what's going on there. They go to these individuals who will let them know, who will certify that the problem they're having, the challenges they're facing, is actually as a result of witchcraft. So it's not just only as a result of accusation people are making, but also certification of that allegation by so-called, they call them witch doctors or witch hunters or traditional priests. They certify this thing and now make the person to be deeply convinced and strongly believe that this problem is as a result of the so-called witches or wizards, which they identify in the course of trying to certify the source of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as COVID is concerned, there probably is a man they can blame, but I don't think he's in Nigeria.
Okay.
But yeah, in Zambia, they also have widespread belief in witchcraft, but they believe that witches can fly using stolen blood,
Okay.
and that a shooting star is a witch falling down to Earth.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's because I spent a lot more time outside looking at the sky while I was there, but I saw a lot more shooting stars in Zambia than I do in the U.S.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, there's also belief in what they call maybe in Malawi they have what they call the witch plains. You know,
Yeah.
in Malawi they have what they call the witch plains, and they said that, and I told them that why can't the witch plane fly to Nigeria or fly to where I can see it? You know, it always flies from Malawi to South Africa, and it doesn't. Nobody confirms when it arrives in South Africa. They will stay in Malawi and tell you the witchcraft has gone to South Africa and carry people and all that. So they have all this kind of, myth and this kind of absurd beliefs that they use to really valorize, the notion of witchcraft and witchcraft accusations.
Really? That's interestingly, after the Zambia National Airline went out of business, the Zambian president said, okay, we have some blood donors here. We would like some witches to fly planes for us using their magic. And no one came forward. It's almost like he didn't believe they existed and was making fun of people who thought they were witches, or people accusing others of witchcraft, as the case may be. But
Yeah.
a bunch of people do witchcraft, or I guess claim to be doing it benignly, as they can say it and not get attacked. Said that it has to be stolen blood, not donated blood, used to fly.
Yeah. Yeah, we have such narratives here too. But what they say more is that they turn to birds and fly in the night, and they always turn to birds in the night. They don't turn to birds in hospitals where people are looking at them and they escape. They always turn in the night, and nobody sees them until they turn into another human being, seen at the bus stop at a very crowded place, not actually a very clear place. You will see, okay, these birds are turning into human beings. Can you see the legs are turning into the wings, or things like that? So we have all these narratives, but what happens is that they are not really taken lightly. In some very remote parts of the city, or in the squalid sections, overcrowded sections, it can actually lead to the killing and lynching of elderly people, especially those with dementia, and who cannot speak coherently or explain where they're coming from and all that. So it could actually lead to the death of people. So we have all sorts of narratives of how the witches operate, but unfortunately, there is no way to confirm this. But people believe that strongly, that it happens.
Yeah. Weird that something that should be so striking doesn't seem to get observed, and that people are still killed over it for sure. And what type of people are typically making, or who are the big people making accusations of witchcraft?
Well, I mean, the people making these accusations are usually people who suffer what I could say uncanny, unexpected misfortune. Many wealthy people who have, let's say, the only son or only child, and that only child dies suddenly. So they lose it in terms of trying to get a rational explanation. Oh, this child was ill, was careless, or something. No. So when people who are well-to-do, who are rich, suffer some kind of misfortune, either their children die suddenly or they have an accident, there's always the tendency for people to nudge and push and persuade the person to think it has to do with supernatural or witchcraft or evil people who are trying to get at them. So rich people and who apparently should feel more secure, no, they feel also so insecure, especially when tragedy strikes. again, a lot of people who are in rival positions, struggling for land, struggling for family space, struggling for power, political position. So they see the other party as going after them materially and immaterially, physically and metaphysically, naturally and supernaturally. So that in case anything happens, like people who are contesting for a position, either promotion, position in the office. So if something harmful happens to one party, the person will attribute it to the other because that was the way to stop or undermine the person's progress. So people in very political positions, that's why you see politicians competing either to emerge the governor or president or to be given this kind of appointment, they make these accusations. Or those who are trying to, of course, make progress in life, build houses. Like now, they will tell us that there are some people that cannot allow them to finish their apartments because here a lot of people, they have to raise money and build their own apartments. So if they cannot finish it because of the economy, because of other competing needs and demands, they will attribute it to witchcraft and the witches in the villages. And these witches are always more powerful in the villages than in the cities, so in the communities. So powerful people, rich people who often suffer misfortunes or setbacks too often make accusations of witchcraft.
So aside from individual arbitrary motivations for that, like personal loss and things like that, can you speak to any institutional aspects to this phenomenon? Obviously, at this point, the Catholic Church, for example, has moved on from being very heavily invested in upholding this persecution. But are there religious communities, churches? I think off air we might have talked about the Liberty Foundation Gospel Ministries. Could you talk about the bigger, more powerful institutional actors that are contributing to this problem, and maybe later on how their influence can be curbed?
Okay, you see, when you say the Catholic Church in Nigeria, we don't actually have the Catholic Church. We have priests and different churches doing their own thing, including exorcism, witchcraft accusation, and all that. So, and we have other churches as they are competing for membership, they're competing for influence, because the more members they have, that's the more money they have. So it's not like in other places where you have churches that are paid, priests are paid by the state and they have the official salary. No, your salary is determined by the number of followers you have. So you are sent to a community and like a business, do your best to grow your business, profit from it, or you fail. So we have this entrepreneurial church tendency here, which allows priests to do their thing, whatever that can get them to really grow their churches. So one can say that Catholic Church has moved on. In Nigeria, they have not, to the best of my knowledge. Institutionally, they will tell you that they don't have anything to do. What individual priests are still conducting exorcism and still, attributing the problems in families to witchcraft, and of course, inviting people to come for deliverance and all that. That's said. Now, but we have other churches, Pentecostal, which is also more freestyle kind of church practice and Christian practice. So what happens is that these churches also depend on the pastors and what they want to do and how they want to go about, their everyday church practices. And that's where we have the Liberty Gospel Church. Is Helen Ukpabi that owns it, and is the main driver, is the Pope, is the Bishop, is the one that tells the church members what they want and however they want to live. So it's just like an extension of the individual. like the Liberty Gospel Church. It's not an institution, it's just an extension of the individual. So she does whatever she likes, and she promotes whatever doctrine she wants. So that's exactly what we have in Nigeria. The churches are competing, and they are using every means to gain credibility, to amass members and bring followers to themselves. So, and that is why they use the witchcraft narrative, which is something that appeals to the people. In fact, recently there was a new church that came up in the city where I live, and they did a crusade against witchcraft and marine spirits. Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago here in the city where I live. So, and when you complain to the church, the umbrella body of the churches, they will say, look, that they don't have much control over what individual churches are doing and their priests. And sometimes they will tell you they belong to this group, what we belong to that. They just try to find excuses, why they cannot take action against some of these churches. So, yes, they are part and parcel of the problem. And tackling them is also a huge challenge because it is difficult to address or combat witchcraft allegations without being seen as being anti-Christian, anti-Islam, or anti-religion, or anti-God. That's the problem. And that's why a lot of people have been running away from this campaign over the years, because nobody wants to be accused of being against Christianity or Islam or religion or God. And that is why I have decided to make it a point of duty, to come out openly as a humanist, as an atheist, to say, hey, we have had enough. If this is what you need, okay, we are anti those things, but this has to stop. So this is part and parcel of the problem. But what are we doing also? We're also trying to engage them. Because recently we saw that the Scottish Church apologized for their role in the witch hunting in the early modern Europe. They issued an apology. And that's what we are using here. We tell all the churches, look, your counterparts in Europe, your counterparts in Britain are issuing apology against this. Why are you continuing what they have apologized for? Why can't you emulate them and all that? So we are trying to use that as a kind of a template to engage the churches in terms of witch persecution. Is it working? I don't know yet. I hope time will tell how far it's going. But that's one thing we are doing actively now, trying to use that to get the churches or get the religious bodies to abandon witch persecution and witch finding and witch trial.
Yeah, and it's probably worth mentioning that from at some point in the 700s until some point in the 14 or 1500s, the official position of the Catholic Church was that witchcraft does not exist. Therefore, witch hunting is murder because you're killing somebody over something that doesn't exist.
Okay.
And then after the Protestants sprung up, kind of changed their opinion on the matter a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. It is everything we can get in terms of the history of the church, in terms of their position against witchcraft accusation is very helpful. But very often when you make reference to that, they will say, but we are Africans. They try to take this kind of, they get into this box, but we are Africans. As if to be African is to be trapped in the early modern European mindset, that kind of thing. So it is a challenge. Like I said, we are going to use all those instances in the history of the church in Europe, but we also know what they could also say. Why they try, we can't do it like Europeans because we are Africans. So we will try to do the best we can to engage them, no matter the kind of argument, that people try to advance to justify witch persecution.
Well, and as far as that's concerned, I don't know about Nigeria, but in Zambia, it's very explicitly stated that white people cannot do witchcraft or be affected by witchcraft. And it goes back to missionaries saying that early on.
Yeah, the thing there is that that the whole idea is mixed here. Because of the colonial experience, they have a feeling that, yeah, Europeans don't believe in witchcraft. Some people have that in Nigeria. They have this feeling, they don't believe in witchcraft. Or they have their own witchcraft. That's another narrative. And sometimes they try to use the Wiccans, the pagan, the emerging pagan religious system to justify that. So we have all sorts of narratives here in terms of the fact that, yeah, this is African witchcraft, and they try to do this anthropology thing. There's this thing anthropologists try to say, yeah, witchcraft makes sense for Africans. It's not superstition. When the superstition is the Western, it's Western people that say superstition. And that's rubbish. That's rubbish. That's why I've been deeply upset with the anthropologists, Western anthropologists. They have done a very bad job here, all in the name of trying to explain witchcraft in Africa to the Western world. They try to make them understand that, oh yeah, for us in Europe, we may think this thing is superstition, but go to Africa. And they will be telling a story that sounds so stupid, so childish, and sometimes very idiotic. I'm sorry. And they will put this as anthropology, and they will tell me to go and study it, and that is it. So what I'm trying to say that African Western anthropologists, in their quest to explain witchcraft in Africa, have really made a caricature. They've presented Africans even as stupid and childish as everybody could think of another. So what I'm trying to say there is that, there are so many other complications there in terms of the role of white people. Now again, some people say, okay, white people don't believe in witchcraft, but now they believe in Jesus, they believe in devil, they believe in exorcism and all that. So there's confusion here. And within this confusion, people have been unable to muster a robust mechanism to address this problem. So either people get into the exoticized notion of witchcraft, it's very powerful for Africans, or they find it difficult to embrace the idea that witchcraft is superstition because they think it's Western. Okay, as if, because I don't know what actually it means. So there's a lot of confusion here. And again, Christianity is also there, also preaching some kind of witchcraft, speaking to the witchcraft universe, supernatural universe. And Islam is there, also speaking to the universe. So there's a lot of confusion here. Yeah, as a result of these traditions, and Africans have embraced them and are finding it difficult to reason independently, thinking independently, question these narratives, and say what they think, not what their tradition, not what their religions tell them to think. So this is actually, the challenge, especially, with the situation in Nigeria. And there's a need for us to really do more as Africans to challenge this, the witchcraft narratives and the underlying, superstitions, warped thinking, illogic that continue to drive, this phenomena.
Yeah, and
I'm starting to wonder what kind of contributing factor racist colonialist systems in the past have had on this issue happening right now. I can't help but wonder how it would have been different, or how much it ties into this phenomenon that those Muslims, those Christians, those colonizers essentially, who all had strange and xenophobic ideas about Africans that they ended up attributing to witchcraft. How much of that attitude has seeped into African culture over the centuries and been internalized as such, as like those are places where witches are there. We have powerful magic. It's part of like the whole African history and tradition. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing is this: which part of the world was not at some point colonized? I don't know. Yeah, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, America. Yeah, people have always conquered others. People have always interacted. The history of humanity is a history of conquest and colonization. It's a history of cultures interacting. In one generation, some people, this society will be enslaved, and another generation, they migrate or get enslaved. So cultures keep interacting with other cultures. I mean, human beings have been doing that since, for maybe hundreds of thousands of years or more. Anthropologists, will tell us about when human beings started moving and interacting and living where they live. It's part of us. So I don't want to see.
An aspect that I find particularly interesting about this phenomenon is how potentially colonized societies or oppressed societies within a certain era can come to internalize some of those concepts and or kind of adopt them for themselves over the centuries, so that even after the fact, it's much more pronounced than it is in other parts of the world.
Yeah, what the way I really want to answer this is that what is really colonizing? What does that mean? For instance, people have their notion of God. Only that Islam brought a God midwife by Muhammad. It's still the same kind of God people are talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
They brought Christians, Europeans brought the Christian God, which is also just like maybe the marks we make on the mark on the face, the book you hold, they'll be telling you love your neighbor as yourself. That is not new. So what is really this colonialism we are talking about? It's just that sometimes how do you say it, just a little sprinkling on what is already the same thing. Yeah, like when you try to go from Islam to Christianity, they just change the name, Abraham, and all that. And you'll be asking yourself, are you actually switching from one name to another, or are you switching from one religion to another? What is really going on here? So they are all pirated forms of mythologies, only that it is rooted in certain cultures and you bring them in, which is actually what I'm trying to say earlier, that is part and parcel of human beings. Like now in Nigeria, we have different ethnic groups with their own language, with their own manner of dressing and things like that. Very strong, that you can actually call them a nation. Okay? So what I'm trying to say there is that, yes, there have been all this influence from outside. But what is important? Is it for us to spend the whole time thinking about how we have been influenced? Or what do we make sense out of all these influences? And how do we make sure that these influences do not define us, that we define and redefine these influences? That is more, for me, that's more important. I'm not against, looking at the influence of the Arab culture, the Islamic culture. How much of it is for our own good? How much of it is for African benefit? How much of it does it enrich us? Enrich our lives? Now, if it comes to like now we have a situation where Africans are killing Africans because they said something. They said it's insulting about Muhammad. That's nonsense. Yes. Or you say something that they think is insults the idea of Christ. They kill themselves. So for me, it's not all about colonialism, how we internalize them, but how are we making sure that these external influences are not undoing us? And instead, we are picking whatever we think is useful and use that to enrich ourselves and come across better, more progressive, more tolerant, more global. Yes, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. That's what it is. So whether you're African or Asian, American, Australian, we're all human beings and we all want the same thing. So I'm more interested in how we make use of these colonial influences as they are and make sure that they are not being used to undermine us, undermine our humanity, undermine our society. Because that for me is more important than any other thing. That it was a colonial influence for me is not the issue. The issue is how do we respond to these colonial influences?
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah. And, well, as far as Europeans and North Americans talking about African witchcraft as a superstition, and their governments are paying for people to get homeopathy, they're really not in a position to be criticizing anyone else for silly superstition here. I
Yeah.
think it's just Britain that's doing that, but the fact that people can still sell homeopathy says a lot right there.
Yeah. And of course, there's also this notion that West is scientific, okay? And everything from the West is scientific, which is not true. There are all these single story ideas of people, West is civilized, scientific, technological. There's a whole lot of superstition in the West. And one of them is Christianity. Christianity is a Western superstition, if you can say. So there is always that narrative, that this particular part of the world is so, and it is always a narrative that presents Africans as worse off, as bad, as barbaric, as primitive, as savage, while the other part is civilized, divinized, and painted with these bright and glorified pictures. So at the end of the day, Africans have internalized their own inferiority, all in the name of religion and culture. So which is part and parcel of the challenge we are facing now, because in the quest of trying to see the Christian religion and the Islamic religion as better than, of course, African traditional religion, Africans have internalized their own inferiority. So, and they have they are unable to see the other side of these cultures. Like when I was in Germany, they told me about the 30-year war. That was war they fought for 30 years. And I was like, how many people were left if you have been fighting for 30 years? Okay, so there are other sides of these cultures which we don't see. And at the end of the day, people now always embrace this one-sided idea of these sections of the world, or people, or cultures of the world. And now, and these cultures, they came with a sense that they are better than African cultures. And by extension, that people from these cultures are better than African people. So at the end of the day, Africans have internalized their own inferiority, all in the quest of trying to embrace religion. What I'm saying there is this: these religions are human attempt to make sense of the world, whether they're traditional African religion, whether they're Islam or Christianity. And they should be seen like every other thing human. They're feeble, they're limited, they are attempts to make sense of the world by people across cultures. And essentially, none is better than the other. And to think that one is better than the other is actually to be mistaken in terms of our understanding of these religions and traditions and the role they play in our lives.
Indeed. And I guess one other thing to cover before we wrap up. In Zambia, there's a few ways that people use to identify witches. The most horrifying one is by the Lunda tribe, who are in the west of the country, where they say that they have these flying coffins, where if somebody was killed by witchcraft, the coffin will guide the pallbearers to the house of the person who was doing it, and more likely than not, the person inside the house will be killed on the spot. 99% of the time, they just go to the graveyard and there's nothing more to it. But that other 1% of the time, somebody else is going to be dead before the end of the funeral. And otherwise, you don't hear that much about witchcraft in most of the rest of the country, aside from it's a thing that happens that people are afraid of. And people do spells before they're doing something risky. Though they heard that poachers usually do some magic before they go raid a park. But like, what kind of tests do people do in Nigeria?
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of tests. Like I said, Nigeria has so many cultures and they do that differently. What you said now, they do it in Nigeria as well, in some communities. When people die, they try to, first of all, we have post-mortem witch trial. If you are suspected to be a witch, in some communities, you could be tested so that they know where to bury you, whether to bury you within the family or to take you to an evil forest so that you go there not to affect people who are living. So we have post-mortem witch trial. And we also have situations, where people are also, when they die, the people carrying the corpse will now, if they suspect that the person was killed, they will now try to get the dead body to spot, take them to where the person, whose house it is. They do it in Nigeria, in some parts of Nigeria. They also do it in Ghana. And but what happens is that these days is only the poor people again. It's the poor people, not the rich people. Because when politicians, the presidents are coming for funeral, you can't do this. When they're coming for the funeral of very rich and influential people, you can't do this. But it's only when elderly women, widows, in the communities, or when they murder a relative of a rich person who suspects or who suspected that such a thing must have occurred. Okay, that's when such a thing can be done. So we have such practices. In Ghana, they also have the one they do with chicken. Yeah, and if they kill the chicken and the chicken lies, with the face facing the ground, they say the person is guilty. Or if it is person, if it lies down, facing the sky, they say the person is innocent. They also use a broom, something like a broom. It's actually, they try to put it across the neck of the suspected witches, and the person on whose neck the broom couldn't separate. It's actually the guy that holding the broom, but he will claim that the gods can't separate the broom, when he tries to squeeze it, put it across the neck this way. So they say that the person is now the one who is the witch, if the broom can't separate. So they will choke, they try to choke the person, and sometimes the person will begin to confess. And of course, you have to admit, and many of them confess so that they could be left. Otherwise, they get choked to death, as a result of that. So we have that in Ghana, but in Nigeria, they do the corpse, they carry the corpse and try to do that. But more often, they go and consult people and bring the names of the people, represent them with some stones, and try to. The diviner will use the divining stick, to identify which name is the person responsible for that. So they have other divinational accessories, divinational ways and mechanisms they try to use to identify the person. So that's how it is. It is done in Nigeria, but it's not something that today is widely celebrated. Is often done in secret these days. So you go privately to the diviner or the priest, and through consultations and divinations, they determine the person and you come back home. So that's what is done today, because a lot of people frown at it, and if care is not taken, the person could be charged to court. So they do it secretly these days.
Yeah, and I believe there's also a thing where somebody accused of witchcraft is thrown into a river where there's crocodiles, and it's believed that if a crocodile eats them, they were guilty.
Yeah. When I was in Ghana, they told me about the crocodile test, which wasn't I went to the river. They told me there were no more crocodiles, in the river. That when there used to be crocodiles in the river, what they would do is that they would push all the suspects into the river, and it's not the crocodile that would determine. The one that the crocodile catches and tries, that's the one that is that he's guilty. So that's the. But they told me that the crocodiles, either they have eaten them up or all, and none is now in the river. So they stopped the test because the crocodiles, they went into extinction. The crocodiles in the river. So there was that crocodile test in Ghana, but that's no longer practiced according to them.
Okay. Yeah, it's like a much worse version of the water test that was used in Europe.
Yeah.
And it's probably also worth mentioning that the European water test, where you put a witch in a pond, and if they sink, they're innocent, and if they float, they're guilty.
Yeah.
It seems to actually go back about 4,000 years to ancient Sumer, except there it was a little better. If somebody was attacked with witchcraft, I believe in the law code of Hammurabi, they could get the house of the person who used witchcraft against them in compensation. But the test worked a little differently there. There, it was the person who claimed to be attacked by witchcraft who would be thrown in the river.
Wow.
So, little incentive not to make a fake accusation, and for an extra incentive, if you made a false accusation of witchcraft, your house would go to the person you falsely accused. So a great way to end. As far as we can be sure about anything that may have or may not have happened 4,000 years ago, witchcraft accusations were very, very rare. Plus, their witchcraft was the same rituals to the same gods as everything that would be done normally, just for evil goals instead of benign goals, which raises a lot of questions about their religion, actually, if their gods don't make that kind of distinction. And for people who don't know, Sumer is in what is now Iraq.
Okay.
So away from the very thorough background information, thank you for that, by the way. I wanted to get back to your work with Atheist Alliance International and potentially other work that you've done. You've talked about organizing groups for campaigning against witch persecutions and applying the existing law against those kinds of accusations. Have there been any specific cases with AI or with some other organization that you worked for? People who have gotten out of difficult situation, people who are accused. Just to get a story of someone who's directly affected by this, and kind of understand the issue on a more personal level, I guess, because and I always think stories are the best ways to connect with those issues. Are there any cases that you worked with that you think are worth talking about here?
I mean, there's so many cases. Of course, these cases are such that, of course, many dynamics are at play, and on the side of the AI thing, I think that AI is going through a process now, and I hope that they'll get out of it stronger and better and more focused, so that they could get back to doing what they used to do, which is trying to not just only organize internationally, but also support projects and programs, especially in countries in Africa and other parts of the world. So, I mean, we have a couple of cases at hand now. For instance, in Calabar, in Saudi, Nigeria, we have cases where, in this very instance, the alleged witches were killed, and we are trying to get to court. We are trying to also do some kind of educating the communities. So what we try to do is that use our intervention as a message. Yes, like what we are doing in Calabar as we speak. And some days ago, I also got the news from another state, they call it Adamawa in northern Nigeria. And they told me that the cases are so rampant, the killings. They have killed pregnant women. They killed and lynched a woman some days ago. and they are actually asking us to come and help in education and to come and help enlighten the people. So we have promised them, I promised them within the year that we will be there. But there are security challenges in Nigeria, so that makes it so difficult. And some of these areas, the security is very porous, so it's really very challenging for us to organize meetings. So one of the things, some of the cases we can, really engage at, like now the one we have, let's say, where the person survived. Because when the victims are dead, the only thing we could do is to try and get the accusers or the suspect to court, and that's it. Then try to do some educational programs. But we have many cases where the victims are alive, and we have that, like I said, in some states. And it is important that we use that to send a message, a clear message to the people. Like in Benue State, in Imo State, in Plateau State, we have children who survived accusations. They poured gasoline on them and they said them are blessed, but they were able to, they survived and they are in school now and we are supporting them. So by supporting them, we'll be sending a very strong message, and message of deterrence, message of solidarity, message of the fact that these people are innocent, and message that will get people to rethink their allegations and attributions of witchcraft. So in one of the states, we have a situation where children are involved. A lot of people will force their children to confess that they are witches, that they have been initiated by an uncle or a relative. And from there, they will just go and attack this uncle or relative, and they continue to stigmatize this child and all that. We have that in Bauchi State. We have it in Cross River. We also have it in Adamawa and a couple of places. So what happens is that we have these cases which actually we can use to send a very clear message. It's not only in Nigeria, but also in Malawi. In Malawi recently, a woman was accused of killing the daughter-in-law through witchcraft. The daughter-in-law was living in South Africa. So the allegation was that she went all the way from Malawi to South Africa to kill this person. And when they were burying the woman, somebody pushed her into the grave of the woman. But she narrowly escaped. They rescued her and she's still alive. So what we can do is sometimes through our contacts in Malawi, in Nigeria, or in some other places in Kenya, in Zimbabwe or Zambia, we could provide some support to these victims and use that opportunity to send a message of enlightenment, a message of rethinking, a message of awakening, intellectual awakening to people in these places. Yeah, so we have some cases that we are hoping that we could get support, from our international bodies and umbrella bodies so that we can use that to begin to beat back the tide of witch persecution and witchcraft accusation.
Okay, so now I have a question for each of you. First, Ben, you're in the Peace Corps and you served in Africa as well, right? Does this issue relate to any of the work that you have done or any work that is done by international help organizations like the Peace Corps when it comes to efforts for education, for religious coexistence, that kind of thing? Does that fall within that purview at all? And more generally, are there international organizations, solidarity organizations and structures that people can support or potentially even join to proactively work on those issues? I guess the second part of the question also goes to Dr. Ingrid as well. Yeah, what kind of efforts are playing out on the ground for education, for prevention, and all of that, and how can people support them? Do you want to go ahead first, Ben?
Yeah, in Zambia, well, first of all, it's not something people talk about a lot. So being an outsider in the village, it's only so much I was able to learn about it. For me, no, I didn't. I didn't involve me much, and there wasn't much I could do about it. I guess, I mean, the Zambian state does not look the other way to witchcraft, to murders involving witchcraft by any means. It's just that in a lot of remote areas, and Peace Corps Zambia is almost everyone is in a remote area. The exceptions are not normal volunteers. They're doing something special in a city and they're not there for the full term. But one of my friends had a witchcraft murder in his village, and when someone was killed in the bush, and he said, "Don't the police frown on that?" And the response was, "What? They're not going to find him." But no, there's not. Dr. Igwe would have a lot more ability to comment on it or just know more than I would. But apparently, a lot of headmen, and from what I understand, I was in a hotspot for witchcraft in Zambia, but I almost never saw anything related to it. But apparently, a lot of headmen do it. And
Okay.
there is also, I hear an element that it's jealousy is a major driver of witchcraft accusations in Zambia, but not the way you necessarily think. It's not generally somebody who's better off than others. It's somebody who's better off than their family is, like someone who's risen above where their family is. And that I think is mostly in the Bemba tribe. Among the Mamboys and Tongas, I don't think that's a thing. And now Mamboys dominate the business community, and Tongas are very overrepresented as teachers and other government jobs that require a lot of education. And they're the ones who don't have the same level of jealousy. But yeah, Dr. Igwe?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on which case we are looking at. We take it on case by case basis. So efforts we are making here is, first of all, if these accusations, if the accused person is alive, we try to take care of the person, relocate the person from the scene, have the person go to the police. If the person is interested, we actually try to support the person along the line the person wants. If the person want to go to court, we try to get them to get the lawyer, provide some legal assistance, and if the person is in need of relocation, medical assistance, we could provide some money. Like recently, we had a case where somebody was accused of witchcraft, and the son, smashed the car. We had this in Benue State on December 21. Somebody told us that. So what we try to do is to provide some money for the person, just to send a message. We try to use every means to send a message of solidarity and support to them. So it depends on the case. It's on case by case basis. So when the person is dead and family members need justice, we try to support them, direct them, advise them on what to do. When the person is alive, we try to know, is the person in hospital, we provide some money to take care of the medical bills. If he's a child, we try to support the person to get back to school. If the person suffers some damage to the house or car, we try to get them to get some assistance. So we do that on case by case basis. But the overall idea is that we have to be there to support them, because what happens is that when people are accused, people abandon them. In fact, sometimes the elderly people are abandoned in their homes and they die. Yes, they will be defecating. I had stories where people who are accused of witchcraft are left. Many of them will be defecating on their body till they die of hunger, and they now go and bury them. So we have had some very terrible stories. So it's on case by case basis, and we respond based on the needs we identified when we understand each case. So that's how we respond.
Okay, and lastly, how could people support your work and people who are doing work like yours?
Well, they can support us in various ways. First of all, we work closely with Humanist International, and people can also support us because we need a kind of existing funding because we get the news. This month, we have gotten news for intervention from 2-3 states. So we need a kind of an ongoing funding that can allow us to intervene at the shortest notice. So, but they can do this through our partner organizations. They can send us, a donation directly. We have a web page, where they can use to contact us. We still can't have a PayPal kind of this thing because of the situation in Nigeria. So a lot of people can reach us with their donations directly, or they can channel it through the Humanist International or other partner organizations. But we have our own Facebook page, but we are still working hard to see if we can get a direct donation mechanism. We don't have that yet because of some issues with Nigeria and fraud and all that. So people can reach us directly and send us donation, or they can use through our partner organizations like Humanist International, to send us donations, and they will always get to us. But what is important is that we always need to have some funding that can allow us to intervene at the shortest notice, because witchcraft accusation is usually a matter of life and death. And when people contact us, sometimes we can't reach out, we can't call the police, we can't get people to the venue. It's really very frustrating. So we really need all the support we can get to make sure that we respond early, swiftly, and effectively whenever people reach out to us, urging us, to come and help or assist them, when people are accused.
Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely outrageous that people are having their lives destroyed because of an imaginary crime, essentially a delusion that other people have about them. And I would encourage everyone listening to donate and get in contact with your organization. What's your organization's name again?
It's Advocacy for Alleged Witches. Advocacy for Alleged Witches.
And follow them on Facebook for updates.
So yeah, follow Advocacy for Alleged Witches on Facebook. Click on the link that we're gonna post below to donate. Get in contact with them if you would like, right? And Dr. Igwe, please send us all of the links as soon as we have the opportunity after the show. Yeah, that being said, thank you so much for being here, and I would like to, finally ask if there are any points that we haven't covered that you think are important to discuss, or anything extra that you might want to add to the audience.
Yeah.
Are there any points that we haven't covered that you want to talk about, or
Okay. I think that we've done justice to this point now, and of course, I also want to know that we also have a project to promote critical thinking, which is also important if people really have to abandon their belief in witchcraft. So it's also something that we are also working hard to do, in schools, so that we can weaken the grip of critical thinking, of dogmatic, superstitious thinking on the minds of people. So I think otherwise, the focus now is trying to make sure that we end witch hunting in Africa just like we've done in Europe. I want to see if this can happen in my own generation. And that's why we set out 2030, 2030, as the deadline where we can now begin to shut down this kind of violent phenomena going on here. We want to make every African an advocate. So it is uppermost in our campaign now, and I'm appealing to everybody out there, schools, colleges, universities, please mainstream these efforts, invite us, give us platforms to begin to spread this message, and let us join the rest of the world in making witch hunting history, not just in the West, but also here in Africa and of course, the rest part of the world.
Yeah, hopefully that can be done. It would be nice to finally see an end to thousands of years of witchcraft accusations. And to all of our audience, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and New Year's, and I hope 2023 is a much better year than 2022 and the preceding few years. Tschüss.